يا سائلي عن مذهبي وعقيدتي رزق الهدى من للهداية يسأل.
Brothers, the reality is we live in a time where Islam is under fire, it's under attack, it's being challenged from every single possible angle you could think of. Every single avenue you could think of, every single perspective you could think of. Islam is being attacked. We're here this evening to talk about a specific angle, a specific perspective, which is the intellectual perspective, from the perspective of the modern day, 21st century science, scientific rationalism, all of these types of things that happen in our society. But remember, this is a holistic issue. Islam is being attacked, it's been challenged from every single angle you can think of, brothers. And the reality is we have more Muslims today in the 21st century than we've ever had in history before. Right? 1.6 billion Muslims plus, according to some of the stats in the world today. 1 in every 4 people is a Muslim, and that number is increasing. But for some reason, we are in a situation or a state where we are the most looked down upon people on the face of this earth, the most, almost you could say, the most humiliated people from a global perspective in the eyes of the non-Muslims, the most oppressed people in the world. And I want you to ask yourselves a question as we go through today, and that is the question of why. Why is it that we are so many in number, that we have the Quran with us, the book that was sent down to the Prophet ﷺ, intact, letter by letter, word by word. It's exactly the same as it was when it was revealed to him ﷺ over 1400 years ago. We have the exact words of Allah with us today. Yet our situation is completely different from what it was then. See, when Islam started, there wasn't hundreds of thousands of people, there weren't billions of people. How many people were there? Someone give me a number. When Islam started. How many people did Islam start with? 1. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yeah? And then he started to gain followers. But these few people changed the face of this earth. These few people reformed the earth, reformed the world at the time. And the world was in a mess back then as well, just like it is today. But these people, they reformed humanity. But they first reformed themselves through this book. Right? So really think about something today, brothers. If there's any sisters here today, and ask yourselves the question, if Allah has chosen me to be here tonight, and He is giving me a sign, because Allah signs everywhere, within the heavens and the earth, within our lives, within the things that happen within our lives. If this is a sign from Allah, what am I supposed to do for the sake of Allah, for this deen, in this lifetime that I have, this life that I have? Ask yourself, keep this question in the back of your mind today, inshallah. Okay? Now, I want to begin with the Quran, inshallah. Right? So there is this narrative that's out there, we all know. Yeah, and most of us have probably heard it ourselves directly. Most of us have probably heard this from our children, at school, maybe some colleagues that at work, maybe our children that go to university, maybe our friends that go to university, maybe ourselves that are in universities. There is these ideas out there, right? That we have science today, we don't need Allah, we don't need God. Science explains everything, no need for God anymore, right? Science has buried God. Science tells us how things work, it gives us things that work. There's no need for God anymore. These are the type of ideas that are being pushed out there. And what I want to suggest to you guys today is that looking at this and studying this for the past couple of years, that this is a deliberate attempt that's been made to push Islam out of the picture, to remove God from society. The rise of new atheism isn't only a Western thing. It's not only in the UK or Britain or Birmingham or London. It's global. It's global. The problem is global. And the sad thing is, brothers and sisters, that we sit here and we're living comfortable lives, but our brothers and sisters back home in our own countries, such as Pakistan, India, Saudi, are being affected by atheism. It's spreading. It's spreading. And they're working really hard to spread this atheism. And one of the tools they use, one of the main weapons they're using is the weapon of science. What they're doing is they're stripping the scientific method away from the Muslims, and we're going to look into this. Because it may come as news to some of us that science has this link with Islam, there's this deep push that Allah gives us in the Quran to do science. But they're stripping science away from Muslims and they're claiming it. And when they're claiming it, then they're saying that look at this amazing method that we're giving the world, whereas you Muslims are backwards. You're following a religion that's over 1400 years ago and it's not giving you anything. You're not progressing, you're not doing nothing. You're just opening your chicken shops and driving your taxis and doing whatever else you're doing. But look at us, we're progressing, we're giving medicine to the world, we're giving chemistry to the world, we're developing amazing things, we're going to the moon and beyond. And these narratives are being repeated over and over again across the world. Recently there was an article that was published in Dawn. Dawn's one of the leading magazines, news outlets in Pakistan, by a professor named Parvez Goodboy. He's of a secular disposition. I'm not going to label him, call him atheist because he hasn't said it himself. But the ideas he's promoting and sharing with the world in Pakistan, and remember these are our families in many cases, yeah? Many of our families, our nephews and nieces will be going to school in Pakistan, maybe to college and universities. He's saying that Islam is holding people back. It's stopping people from progressing. Look at the West. This is what he says in his own words. Look at the West. There's so much progress because they don't bind themselves with this backward religion. There's progress. We have science. We're exploring the world. We don't hold on to myths anymore like this. So these are the narratives that they're pushing out there. And I'm telling you, brothers, that there is no weight or strength to these narratives, these ideas that they're pushing. And we're going to see that today, inshallah. My aim is to leave you guys with enough information, something that you can take away and start sharing with your families and friends and colleagues and in universities, wherever you go, and really understand the relationship that's always been there between science and Islam from the beginning. Right? And I want us to really claim this method back, claim science back and become scientists and do the science, inshallah. And lead the way. Show the secular scientists and the atheist scientists of how science is really done, inshallah. Right? So make that intention right now, brothers, wallahi, for the sake of Allah. That you're going to do something, inshallah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to make a difference, right? Keep this in mind, inshallah. So let's begin with the Quran, because the Quran is the literal word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is guidance for us throughout our entire lives, from every facet of life. As the brother recited earlier, a verse from Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 190 and onwards, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَا يَهْتَدِي أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and really pay attention to these words now, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran to reflect over the Quran, to do the tadabbur over the Quran, reflect over it deeply. And I want us to reflect over this verse right now for a few minutes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, indeed, absolutely without a shadow of a doubt, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in this creation we see around us, when we walk outside we see the stars, we see the sun in the morning and the moon at night, we see the planets, or as stars from a distance, they look like stars by the naked eye, but we observe these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, in this universe, in this creation, there are clear signs. There are clear signs, there are ayat. There are clear signs that point directly towards it. That point directly towards it. And these signs are for who? These signs are for people of understanding, people of reflection, people of intellect, people of intelligence. Now think about this for a second. What does this verse tell us? A few of the conclusions we can arrive at is that there are signs within the universe, no doubt about it. We can also come to the conclusion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging us. Allah is telling us to observe the universe, to look into the universe. Allah is telling us to do this. Look into this open book that I have given you. You know, as the scholar said, there's two books. There's the closed book and there's the open book. The closed book is the Quran and the open book is this entire universe. This entire cosmos that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And Allah is telling us to look into it, observe it, reflect over it. In another part of the Quran, Allah tells us, for example, do they not see the camels and how they were created? Observe. Obviously the word used isn't science, but what is science? Science is to do observations, to look into the universe, the physical world, reflect over it, ponder over it, try to understand it. Allah is telling us to do that in the Quran. Allah told us to do this over 1400 years ago. Allah told us to reflect over the universe. But something very interesting is happening. Because who reflects over the universe today in the 21st century? Who reflects over the universe? Someone tell me. Who does the observations? Atheist scientists. Yeah? Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and all of these guys. Yeah? They are observing the universe. They are doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to do. But something very interesting happens. They observe the universe and they see the amazing nature of the universe. They can't deny it. They can't deny the amazing nature of the universe. But when they see it, they're just amazed by it. That's it. They can't explain it. They're amazed by it. Because they're not people of understanding. They're not people of understanding. And I'm going to prove this to you from the verse that follows, inshallah. But really think about this for a second. They have access to all of the laboratories, all of the equipment that you need to observe the universe from a grand scale size of things. For example, the entire universe, the stars, the solar system, the galaxies, all the way down to the atom. They can observe both spectrums. They can see what's seen through the microscope and they can see what's seen through the telescope. Yet when they look at the universe, they're amazed by it. There's fine-tuning within the universe. There's order within the universe. There's precision within the universe. The universe is mathematical in nature. Galileo said, the universe is mathematical in nature. The language of mathematics. Einstein, everyone knows Einstein, right? Einstein, you know what he said? He said, what is inconceivable, and really pay attention to this. He said, what is inconceivable about the universe is that it's at all conceivable. Think about this statement. He's saying, in simple language, in modern day English, he's saying, what blows my mind about this universe that we live in, the more I study it, is that the fact that we can study it and understand it. It's ordered. It's ordered. It follows laws. But back to the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these signs are for people of understanding. And then who are these people of understanding, my brothers? The following verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us who the people of understanding are. They are the people who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sitting, standing, and lying down in every state. And then reflect deeply over the universe. Allah is giving us two criteria, brothers, to be people of true, deep understanding. Criteria one, begin with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't believe in Allah because of some silly logical argument or some scientific proof or evidence. We believe in Allah because Allah placed that within us first and foremost. It's a part of our fitrah, but Allah gives us signs throughout our lives. Everything in this existence is a sign. We begin with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people of true understanding, and this is the creator of the heavens and the earth, brothers. They say, no crazy scientist in a laboratory who studied for 5-6 years and there's a human being who's going to die like all of us. This is Allah. This is the one who's sustaining you right now, who's allowing you to breathe right now, to function right now, and to listen to me and hear me and understand what I'm saying. Who brought you here today. This is Allah. He's telling you, people of understanding are people who first begin with Allah. They remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In every state, they're always in the constant remembrance, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then they reflect over the universe. Then they do the science. Because these people, when they do the science, when they look into the universe, they see the signs of Allah. They see the signs of Allah. And what does it do for them? It helps them, it directs them, it pushes them towards the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what we were created to do. Allah tells us in the Quran that He created mankind and jinn for no other reason except to worship Him. And look at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To help us do this, everything is a sign. Even when you believe in Him and you look at the universe, it's a sign. It will lead you towards His worship. So brothers, as one of the, as beloved Sheikh Sheikh Yawar Beg said in one of his lectures, it's a very powerful point. He said, we as Muslims need to define or lay the foundations of, the true foundations of studying and gaining knowledge. Not the secularists. See, the secular world, the secularists and the atheists in the West, their foundations to study and gaining knowledge is skepticism. They begin with skepticism. They don't begin with God. They begin with nothing. And then they say, based on this, we have an entire worldview and we're going to study the world and do science. This is why when they look into the universe, they're amazed by it, but they can't make sense of why it's like that. But as Muslims, when we see it, we're amazed by the universe, but we're not perplexed. We're amazed by it, but we understand that this is because of the Creator, the Maker. So it makes sense. The order in the universe makes sense. The laws in the universe make sense. The precision of the universe makes sense. So brothers, we set the criteria. We have had this inferiority complex for a very long time, honestly. We're going to secular institutions, into schools and universities, and we just have this complex. We're worried. We're worried. We go by their definitions. My family's from Pakistan. Yeah, I've been to Pakistan several times. And it's sad. Look at our state. We are turning towards Western culture. When we go to university as Pakistanis, even in the West, we come out with this pride, this arrogance. Yeah? I'm going to follow the philosophers and the professors. But we don't remember our tradition, which is far more powerful. We follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives us direction. He teaches us what's the best way of learning. So have that in mind, brothers and sisters, from today onwards. Whenever you study, begin with Allah. Wallahi, when you study the world after you begin with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and connect with Him and realize that He is the Creator, everything will make sense. Not only within your life, but when you study the world, whether you do psychology, philosophy, whatever you study, it will make sense. But the reason we're losing Muslims in academic institutions is because we don't know what our foundations are. We don't begin in the right way. We don't begin with Allah. We've turned away from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So have this in mind, brothers, right? Allah gives us the criteria. Now what I want to do, brothers, and what I want to do now is I want to go into explain to you guys a bit of what science is. Okay? Because I really believe if we just have a brief understanding of what the scientific method is, what science is, we do science. When we go to schools and universities, we're taught how to do science in a lab or wherever it may be, but we're not told what science is. Once we understand what science is, it will make it easier for us, inshallah. Then we'll really understand the relationship between God, science, Islam, why you can be a practicing Muslim who follows the Quran to the letter, but at the same time, not only be a good scientist, but be the best scientist. And not like the atheists want you to believe, that if you follow the Quran to the letter, then you can never do science. You'll be a very bad scientist. That's not true. And we're going to, inshallah, look at that. We're going to understand why that's the case, inshallah. So, brothers, science is a method. We need to understand this. It's been presented as God, the absolute be-all and end-all of everything, absolute truth. It's not. It's a method. Bertrand Russell, one of the most eminent philosophers of science, he defines science as this. He says, science is an attempt to discover, by means of observation and reasoning upon it, particular facts about the world. So in modern English, what he's saying, or simple English, right, that people like myself understand, he's basically saying that science, this method that we use, is a method that we use to try to understand the physical world. Right? The key word is physical. The physical world around us. How? Through doing observations, observing it, using our senses, our sight, our hearing, our smell, our taste, our ability to feel things, using our senses to observe the world, and then we gather the data, and then what do? We use reasoning on the data, okay? To try and understand the world. So straight away, when we understand this, something becomes very clear. Science is limited to what's observable. It's limited to the physical. Okay? Everyone following me so far, yeah? Science is limited to what's physically observable. If you can see and feel something, or something is physical, you can study it. Now we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is not physical. Allah says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. There is nothing like Him. He is unlike anything you can imagine. Therefore, straight away, what conclusion do we come to? What understanding do we get? Science can never deny the existence of Allah, because science can't ever observe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Science is limited, it has a scope. Right? Imagine there's a big scope this big. Science has a limited scope, which is physical observations. Okay, so straight away, science can never prove or disprove Allah's existence directly. We can ask the question indirectly when we study the universe, what does it point towards? Does it point towards Allah, or does it point towards atheism? Yeah, that we can ask, that's indirect. But science can never directly deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any way, shape or form. Because it's limited to what's physically observable. Okay? And we know there's other means to truth as well. Science isn't the only means to truth. Right? Because there's this idea out there that some of these atheists push, and they say, well, we have science. Science is the only way to truth. And you guys have probably heard this before. Yeah? You guys are religious people. We have evidence. We base everything on science. Science is the only way to truth. Brothers, think about that statement for a second. Science is the only way to truth. Can you prove that statement scientifically? Think about this. That statement, science is the only way to truth. Can you prove that statement itself scientifically? The answer is no. It's a statement. Yeah? So that means that's false. It destroys itself. That idea destroys itself. We know there's many other ways to truth. Maybe we can discuss this in the Q&A, inshallah. Right? So, from that angle, science is limited. Also, another key thing you need to understand. Science is based on induction. Inductive reasoning. Okay? Now, what do I mean by induction? Very simple, brother. We'll break it down into very simple language. Induction is the method science uses to understand the world. Okay? Induction is this, very simply put. You go from a specific set of data, because remember, scientists can't have all the data in the world. Okay? So they say a scientist goes out into a field in Birmingham, and he's told to observe the birds that fly over Birmingham. Okay? So he's given 6 months to do this. For 6 months, he sits there with a book, and he's making observations. He's observing the birds that fly over. One bird flies over white, another bird white, third bird white, fourth bird white. And he does this for 6 months. After 6 months, he's probably observed, say, 50,000 birds. Rough number, yeah? And those 50,000 birds he's observed are all white. Okay? Now, this is what science does. He will take his observations, which are limited, because he could have spent another 2 years observing birds, right? He could have seen another 100,000 birds. But he takes his limited observation, and then he makes a general conclusion. He makes a general conclusion, and this is his theory. He says, all birds over Birmingham in this field are white. This is how science works. Go to any philosopher of science will tell you. They go from a specific set of data and make a general conclusion. But when you do this, there is a very clear problem. And the problem is, there's always room for error. They can't say something is absolutely 100% true in science. You can't say it. Because it's possible that the next bird that this scientist observed, the next 10 birds he observed, were brown. It's possible. Right? It's possible. And if it's possible, that means the conclusion he's made is not 100% true. So the point is, brothers, science is based on induction, therefore science can never give you 100% truth. Right? So this is something very important to understand as well, because you know, the atheists push out this idea, for example, evolution is 100% true, it's a fact. You don't have absolute facts in science. You never have absolute facts in science. They're always approximation. They can get 99% correct, 98% correct, 80% correct. They can never say something is 100% confirmed absolute in science. It doesn't work. You never say it. Okay, so it's something very important to understand. Remember, again, narratives and rhetoric atheists use, these ideas they keep putting into your minds, into your hearts. Science is the truth, evolution is 100% true. Now you've got a tool. Now you understand science can't give you 100% truth. Therefore, okay, you have a theory called the theory of Darwinian mechanism, of Darwinian evolution. It's a working model, it's a working theory. Use it, that's fine. We can use it, but it's not 100% true. Because you can't claim anything to be 100% true in science. Unlike the Islamic tradition, which we know is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's absolute, it's unchanging. Right? So straight away, this gives us a beautiful tool that we can use to understand these two realities. Okay? Another thing I want you to understand about science, and this is a very simple point, the difficult stuff's done, inshallah, yes, and it's very simple now. The difference between how and why. This is something the atheists don't want you to know, don't want your children to know, don't want your friends, your family members to know. I would say even they don't want anyone that goes through the secular schooling system to know this reality. The difference between the how and the why. Science tells you how things work. Or it tries to tell you how things work. It can never tell you why things work. Okay? I'm going to give you a simple analogy. Imagine for a second that your auntie has come from India or Pakistan. Yeah? You were at school, you come home, and on your dining table you find this big chocolate cake with some samosas. Yeah? And you're looking around, you think, where did this come from? And there's a little note next to the cake. And on the note it says, from your dear auntie, I missed you, here is a cake for you. I baked this for you. Because I missed you. Yeah? Now what you do, because you've recently gone into science, you take that note, you put it in your pocket. You pick up the cake, you take the samosa, you take it to a lab in your school. You give it to a scientist. You ask the scientist, tell me everything. Tell me everything you can about this cake. I'll give you 2 weeks. Okay? The scientist is free, has nothing else to do. All he's going to do for the next 2 weeks is study your cake and your samosa. Okay? You go back 2 weeks later, he gives you an entire report, a massive report. On this report, he will tell you how many calories were in the cake and the samosas, what raw ingredients were used, what temperature these things were baked at, yeah? How old the cake is maybe. Yeah? If someone touched the cake, maybe they can tell you that some sort of evidence of touching the cake, fingerprints or something. Yeah? The scientists can tell you everything about the how of the cake, the physicality of the cake. Can the scientists ever tell you why the cake was baked? Or who baked it? Can he tell you that? Think about this. Can he ever tell you that? No. Because this is not in the scope of science. The limit of the scientist was to observe the physical cake in front of him and tell you the how of the cake. He can't tell you that the cake was baked by your auntie, unless he has some sort of jinn or something, yeah? That tells him this. But he can only tell you about the physical makeup of the cake. He can't tell you why the cake was baked or who baked it. Is that understood, everyone? Yeah? Very easy. This is the nature of science. Science can tell you the how, it can never tell you the why. Science can tell you how rain clouds form, but it can't tell you why. Why? Because Allah formed them. Allah is the why. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power, there is no might except the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is in control of every single atom. Everything smaller than an atom. Allah is in constant control of it. Allah doesn't sleep. Allah doesn't rest. Allah is in constant control of these things. There's a very powerful verse a brother shared with me recently in the Quran. I don't remember the reference, maybe one of you can give it to me. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the birds. And He says, do you not see the birds? Yeah? How they're kept up afloat in the air. No one holds them up except Allah. And in this are signs for those who believe. Again, let's ponder over this verse, reflect over this verse. Now, if an atheist saw this verse, what's he going to say? He says, ha ha ha, you silly Muslims, you're saying God is holding the bird with His hand. Obviously, they don't know who Allah is yet. They have this human concept of God, they anthropomorphize God. Yeah? They'll make a joke out of it. But this is what happens when you have shallow thinking. Yeah? They don't reflect, they don't think. People who follow their desires and want to fulfill their desires don't get much time to think and reflect. Yeah? Their hearts are closed anyway. May Allah guide them and guide us, inshallah. Yeah? But let's reflect over this verse. Which is what? The balance between, or the relative balance between the gravity and the air resistance and the aerodynamics of the bird's wings and the shape of the bird's wings and how it creates lift. These are the physical things we can observe and study as scientists. Yeah? But the question to ask is, who made these things like this? Did they make themselves? Did gravity fine-tune itself to be at the exact figure that it's at? Did the air resistance adjust itself? Were the bird's wings developed by themselves? Think about these things. Who does these things? It's Allah. Right? Again, brothers, if you take one thing away from tonight, just let me this. Turn back to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reflect over it. Wallahi, reflect over it. Allah said, do they not reflect upon the Quran, or are the locks upon their hearts? Yeah, think about this verse. Allah is asking us, He's saying, do you not reflect over what I have given you as my speech? Or are there locks upon your hearts? Are your hearts locked? And what's the way of unlocking these hearts then? Turn back to the speech of Allah and reflect over and ponder over it. Yeah, when we think of the unlocking of the heart just from a purely spiritual perspective. But wallahi, your heart's unlocked from all angles. Your mind's unlocked. You see reality for what it is. You understand the world around you for what it is. And this is why I keep saying, if you want to be true scientists, it's through this book of Allah. Because you get a holistic picture and understanding of reality. You won't only be like an atheist scientist who's looking at the how of things, or how things work, but you'll see the why of these things. Yeah? And not only this, you will see the mercy of Allah behind these things, because all of these things are there for you to reflect over, so you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, we're going to touch upon this a bit further. The next point I want to address, inshallah, brothers, is something very, very interesting. Right? And I need you guys to follow me with this as well. The link between Allah, Islam, and science is very, very deep. Yeah? It's so deep that it goes to the foundations of the scientific method itself. Okay? Think about this. Science requires axioms. Now, when I say axiom, I mean some foundational ideas that you have to accept without proving, okay, for you to do science. In philosophy, there's this idea of axioms or basic beliefs, foundational beliefs that you have, on which you build a worldview. Okay, for example, one belief of science, and this is a belief of science, this is not proven by science. Science has to believe this to do science, okay, for science to work. One of the beliefs of science is that the real world is real. Okay? So science has to believe that the world around it, this physical world, is real. And only when it accepts this, then can you go and observe it. Because you can't go and observe something you don't believe is real, right? It doesn't make sense. Yeah? So it's a belief, and there's many beliefs of science. There's many things science relies on, depends on. Okay? Two things, I'm going to talk about two things. Two other things science relies on. One is the aql, the intellect, the rational mind of a human being. Okay? Because who does science? Do cockroaches do science? Do animals do science? Humans do science, right? So, what do we use to do science? We use our rational mind, our intelligence to do science. So, science requires scientists. Science requires humans to do science. If there were no humans, there will be no scientific method. Okay? Very important to understand. The second thing science requires is something to understand. Meaning, the universe that we live in, this world around us, this entire universe that scientists observe, it has to be there and it has to be ordered. For scientists, there has to be something there for science to understand. Okay? There has to be something there for science to understand. Imagine, for example, you have a book, yeah, a storybook, and say it's all random. It doesn't make sense. It just says things like Snickers on a Tuesday, Pizza Hut, shopping. Yeah, and that's one sentence, and the whole book's like this. Yeah, is there any story there? Is there any story? The whole book is made up of these random sentences, gibberish that doesn't make sense. Is there any story there? No. Is there something, when you finish this whole book, are you going to leave with something, understanding? No. Right? So, the same now, apply this analogy to the universe. For a scientist to study the book of the universe, there has to be things there that they can study and understand. It has to be ordered. If it was all random, for example, if one day you woke up in the morning and the gravity was a certain degree, and then the next morning there was no gravity and people were flying over the moon and things like this, you can never do science, because science is based on observations over time. Yeah, so you constantly do observations, then you correlate those observations, you check against your previous data, and you make new theories and you move on like this. Yeah? So you need an ordered universe. Okay, so the two things, what we said, you need an ordered, rational mind that can think, that can understand the world, and a universe that you can understand. You need these two things. Okay? Now let's look at these two things that science is dependent on. Science is dependent on these things. Yeah? Let's look at these two things from the lens or from the perspective of atheism and from the perspective of Islam. Okay? Now let's do this exercise together. What do atheists believe? What do atheists believe? What are the foundations of atheism? Those that deny Allah. Those people that say there is no God, there is no creator. What are their foundations? This is what they believe. They believe everything in the universe, the whole universe, everything that exists, this entire universe, this whole cosmos, came from nothing or blind, random physical processes. Random atoms and molecules without any intelligence, no mind, they're dead atoms, dead physical atoms and molecules, whizzing around, spinning around for thousands of years, colliding into each other, and eventually you have this whole universe and human beings and life and intelligence and consciousness and everything else you see. This is what they believe. Right? Wallahi, brothers, if we just understood what atheists believe, you will never fail them. You will actually go and ask them, how can you believe such a thing? How can you believe such a thing? So what they're saying essentially is, our minds, our rational minds that can understand this universe, and this ordered universe, with all of the laws in the universe, all the mathematical precision of the universe, all of the fine-tuning of the universe that permits life to exist on this earth. Right? And this is precise. Well, brothers, just take any book on the fine-tuning of the universe and you will blow your mind. When you see the precision of these constants, yeah, these constants and quantities, they're so precise, there's so many of them, and they're in line with each other, and they're balanced with each other. When you see the precision of these constants and quantities, you can't deny it. You can't deny there's a creator. There's no way you can deny it. Even Richard Dawkins, an atheist, He says that it seems like someone's monkeyed with the constants of quantity. Someone has fine-tuned it, that's how it looks like. Yeah? Because you can't deny it. You can't. When you look at the order of the universe, the precision of it, you can't deny it. Right? And what the atheist wants you to believe is that everything within the universe, all of the laws and everything within the universe, even you as a human being and your complexity in your DNA, that your foundational building blocks of your life, your consciousness, your rationality, your ability to think, all of these things have come from nothing. That's what they want you to believe. Have come from blind, random physical processes. I'm sorry, but that's absolutely ridiculous, brothers. Wallahi, that makes no sense. And this is why, wallahi, brothers, kufr, disbelief has no legs to stand on. It has no legs to stand on. Literally. It's like this. If I said this phone, just before you guys came in, I was here earlier, if I said that to you, I was here alone, and I was sitting there, and this phone, I just saw pieces of metal come off the screws on the walls, you know, bits of leather and plastic come off the chair, you know, bits of glass from the bottle fly up in the air, when all of these raw materials floated up in the air, whizzed around, and they formed a phone and they came down. Who would believe me? Who would believe me? No one. But this is what the atheist wants you to believe. This is what they want you to believe. And the sad reality is that we don't take the time to learn these things so we can defend the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and protect our families and our friends and our brothers and humanity in general. So they don't disgrace themselves by lowering the intellects to such a level. Think about this, brothers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, what did He raise us for as Muslims? كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. He raised us, He raised you as an example, as the best of nations for mankind, for people. You are supposed to be leaders, especially in this time when there's no more prophets to come. And leadership is not only from one perspective, leadership is holistic. Leadership could be from any facet in life, from a moral perspective. Now, what we're discussing tonight from an academic, intellectual perspective. Lead the way, brothers. Not only for our families, but for humanity. We won't believe such a thing, that this phone can make itself. But they want you to believe that this entire universe, think about this. No one here is willing to bet their house or anything more than that or less than that, that this phone made itself. No one will believe that. Yet when we look at this entire universe, in all of its complexity, in all of its glory, in the human being, we're willing to accept that that can make itself or come by chance. This is a disgrace to the human intellect. Wallahi, this is a disgrace to the human intellect. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Tini, in the Quran, He says that He created us in the best of forms. This is holistically as us as human beings, internally, externally, intellectually. Allah created us in the best of forms. But those that turn away from Him, those that don't know Him, that don't remember Him, they're returned to the lowest of the low. They're returned to the lowest of the low. Really, brothers, wallahi, we've had a tradition of intellectuals. We have had a tradition which led the world. So look at Islamic history. But we've let go of this. We've literally let go of this. And why does Allah give us these things? So we've seen that Islam makes sense of these realities. Or we're going to see that Islam makes sense of this. Atheism doesn't. Atheism doesn't. We've seen atheism makes no sense of this universe or us as human beings, our intellectual capacity. No sense at all. Does Islam make sense of it? Yes, it does. Back to the reason of our creation, which is Allah created us to worship Him. Allah gave us rational minds, these minds that we have, so we look at His creation. As Allah tells us, reflect and ponder over the creation, because in it you will find signs which will lead you back to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah gave us science. I really believe that is the main reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the scientific method. So when we reflect over the creation of the heavens and the earth, we see signs in it of Allah so we can worship Him. This is the mercy of Allah. But what we've turned science into is this dry philosophical, or a dry methodology that's based on philosophical naturalism. Oh, we're just going to study the world and understand how it works. For what? If you're an atheist, ask them the question. If you're an atheist, why do you study the world? Because according to atheism, you're an accident. You're an accident of these random physical processes. Yeah? Random atoms whizzing around. And when you're dead, you're gone. You're going to be eaten by worms and cockroaches in your grave. Why are you studying the world? They want to find cures and do medicine, right? All these things. Why? The atheist, think about it, when the atheist does biology or studies medicine, looks for cures, he's like, maybe there's a cure, maybe there's not. Because that's what his worldview dictates. That's what atheism dictates. They don't know, everything's random. They can't make sense of the order in this world anyway. But foundationally, from the worldview, it's all random physical stuff. Everything's an accidental thing. So based on their worldview, what sense does it make in looking for cures? What internal motivation do they have to do this? Say, you know what, my dear friend in humanity, dear atheist, look at what Islam gives you. Islam teaches us that everything we do in our lives can be a form of worship, of ibadah. Not only praying, you may have this idea that we just pray 5 times a day and that's worship. No, Allah tells us everything you do can be a form of worship. You do it for Allah's sake, to seek His pleasure. So when a Muslim scientist or a Muslim biologist studies medicine, looks for cures, he does it because he wants to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wants to find a cure for humanity. He also does it because the Prophet ﷺ told him what he said, and there's many narrations, the hadith. He said that Allah has not sent down a disease except that He's also sent a cure. So the Muslim has this knowledge. What's the knowledge? That there is a cure. This is motivation. Not like the atheist who's shooting in the dark, maybe there's a cure, I'll waste half my life seeing if I can find one. Wallahi, if a Muslim dedicates his life to finding a cure for one disease, he knows it's not in vain. Because it's a part of his worship and he knows there's a cure there. He knows it's a cure there. So we can see, brothers, Islam not only makes perfect sense of the scientific method, but it also gives us the perfect driving force to do science. Unlike atheism. Unlike atheism. But unfortunately, we've let go of our tradition. We've let go of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've let go of studying and understanding these concepts. And what's happened is that they've said, you know what? You guys aren't doing anything. Thank you very much. We'll take the scientific method. We'll make a mess of it. Yeah? And we will teach you. And we'll use the scientific method to take you away from Islam. Can you see the irony in that, brothers? Allah gave us science to lead us to His worship, but the atheist has taken the scientific method. And wallahi, this is a disgrace upon us. This is a sign for us, brothers. You know, and it's not too late. While you are alive, it's not too late. Remember what I said to you earlier. Ask yourself the why question. What are you going to do? Remember, brothers, nothing happens for no reason. Everything that happens in your life happens for a reason. Everything. You're here tonight for a reason. If you just come tonight because you enjoy coming to some sort of lecture every now and then, get a bit of an iman boost and go home and go to sleep and go back to your daily lives tomorrow, you're 9 to 5 taking care of your children, feeding your pet cat, living your life and then dying, if that's what you want to do, then go ahead. But remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us this. Because He didn't just send us here to live like monkeys and apes and animals, just fulfill our physical desires and needs, or just to go stay in the masjid and pray 5 times a day and not care about humanity or the world around us. But He sent us here for a reason, to be leaders for humanity, to direct people, to show them the right way. And that's in every facet of life. Well, brothers, when the Muslims did this, just study our history, study Islamic faith. When the Muslims did this, it's there for you to read. Many have made an attempt to cover up this history. But even the sincere non-Muslim academics have written about this. Take Islamic Spain, for example. Take Islamic Spain, Andalus, and all of these places. There was progress. It was seen as the beacon of light in the world at the time. For 800 years, there was progress in biology, in chemistry, in mathematics, in engineering, in architecture, in all of these things. People from the West, from the rest of Europe, they will go to the Muslim world. Think about this. They will travel to the Muslim world, Islamic Spain. They will learn the Arabic language, study under the Muslim scholars, come back to the West and teach people there and open up universities. This was the honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. But what was the difference between them and us? They stuck to the book of Allah. They spent time understanding it, reflecting over it, learning it. They understood the balance between the life of this world and what you want to achieve in this world and what you want to achieve for the hereafter. They understood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them as viceroys, as people to guide humanity. They understood this. the Sahaba, there was only a few of them to start with. But they understood this, that they're here with a very deep purpose. They have a very deep purpose, which is to guide humanity. You know, the world saw the greatest empire the world has ever seen within, you know, a certain number of decades after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, there's different narrations, but many of the reports say from parts of Pakistan and Multan all the way to Spain and other parts. Rapidly. Most historians don't understand how this happened, why this happened. But we know why it happened. Because people held on to the book of Allah, the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They connected with Allah. They had a relationship with Allah. Islam is about quality, brothers. It's not about quantity. We've seen that. Wallahi, we've seen that. We have over 1.6 billion Muslims, as I said earlier. But look at us in the state today. And look at them. There was the state of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet in the first few generations. There was a state of the Muslims in Islamic Spain. Fewer in number, but they did great things. And we have every single tool available to us today. Every single one of those tools they have access to. Every single tool. Allah has preserved the Quran, as He says. You don't believe it? Go study it for yourself. It's preserved to the letter. Allah has preserved it for you. But we've turned away from it. Brothers, we need to really sit down and think about these things, inshallah, and ask ourselves very deep questions. Why am I here? Am I just here to be another statistic, die in another 10, 15, 20 years' time, and never to be remembered again or known? Or am I here to do something for the sake of Allah? Am I here to leave a legacy? Am I here to change the world around me? Do whatever I can in my power that Allah has given me. Brothers, be people of aspiration, of desire, of will, something you want to do something for the sake of Allah. Wallahi, I say, even including myself, and I remind myself, we're dead. Wallahi, we're dead. We're so immersed in our lives, day-to-day lives, we're so busy, we barely get time to pray our 5 salah, barely get time to do ibadah. You know, and when we're praying, we're thinking about getting the milk and posting the electricity bill and whatever else there may be. This is our state. No one's to blame except us. No one's forcing us to live like this. Especially us here in the UK. Wallahi, I've been to other parts of Europe, and the Muslims have it rough. They have it rough. They're constantly being pushed into a corner. They can't speak, they can't say things. When they go to the da'wah on the street, they're laughed at, they're spat at, they're attacked. We have it easy here. We have it so easy, brothers. So take this opportunity. Allah's placed you here. Allah will replace us. He doesn't need us. Allah tells us in the Quran, He will replace us. Allah doesn't need you. I'm going to end on this. I want you to really think about this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need any one of us. He doesn't need me, He doesn't need you, He doesn't need Hamza. Yeah, we're just all corpses. That's what we are. Reality, we're flesh and blood and bone. We're going to be dead in another 15, 20 years' time. We're nothing special. Allah doesn't need us, but Allah is giving you an opportunity, brothers. He's giving you a contract. He's offering you a role, a job. The job of the prophets. Enjoin the good, forbid the evil, do something for this world. He's offering us this, wallahi, brothers. He's giving us this on a plate. And this probably isn't the first time for many of us. We've probably been to other lectures and places where people have told us to do something. But shaitan's gotten the better of us, the worldly life's gotten the better of us. Take this opportunity. Wallahi, take this opportunity because it's not going to come again and again. Allah will replace you. Allah will replace you if we don't do something. So ask yourselves, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today, tonight. Now, ask Allah, Ya Allah, use me, utilize me in your path. Allow me to do something in your path. Allow me to transcend this empty life that I'm living. Just doing what everyone else is doing, what the non-Muslims are doing. Just doing my 9 to 5, you know, eating my 3 meals a day, taking care of my children until I die. Do that. There is reward in that. But have bigger aspirations, have bigger goals. Well, like non-Muslims have goals. Have you seen how motivated non-Muslims are? They put us to shame. We can't get to an event on time. Wallahi, we can't get to an event on time. We call it Pakistani time, yeah? 5 minutes, which means 50 minutes. It's a mess. We're in a mess. And Allah says He will not change the condition of people until you change within themselves. This is our Creator. He's telling us, change yourself. Start now. Start today. Don't leave it for another 3-4 months. Start today. This is the time. We look at the news, we've seen what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Aleppo, in Syria. Everyone's been following this, yeah? It's happening. Yeah, but what we do when things like this happen, we get together, have a cup of tea and just complain and get angry and frustrated. You know, swear at the disbelievers, abuse them, curse them. But change yourself, begin with yourself. Get active, do something. Wallahi, it was the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions that led to us being Muslim today. Yeah, wallahi, being Muslim is the greatest blessing any human being, any human Allah's created can have. Because it gives you eternal life. Not just life in this world, it gives you eternal life. Yeah, so think about this. Like, please think about this. Ask yourselves the question, what can I do for the sake of Allah? How can I change myself today? What are the skills that Allah has given me that I can utilize in His path? Yeah? You guys, all of us, we know something very clearly, a few things. Allah created every single one of us. Yes? Allah made every single one of us. Allah is keeping every single one of us alive right now. Yes? This is Allah, He's keeping your atoms together. Yeah, your molecules together. He's holding you together. And Allah tells us in the Quran, He created us to worship Him, but worship isn't limited to just praying. Worship is holistic. And Allah, on top of this, gave every single one of you here something special, a unique skill, a unique ability that other people don't have. This brother here, he can do something I can't do. We probably don't know what it is right now because we haven't spoken, but he has something that I don't have. That brother there has something that he doesn't have or I don't have. Utilize whatever skill Allah has given you in His path for His sake. Turn it into worship, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, brothers, for listening. May Allah bless you. May Allah allow us all to benefit from today, inshallah. Make dua for me, inshallah, as well. Make dua for our brothers and sisters in Syria and Aleppo, inshallah. That may Allah make it easy for them. May Allah forgive us and forgive them and forgive the non-Muslims, and guide the non-Muslims first and foremost. And may Allah make it easy for us globally as a Muslim ummah, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. If there's any questions, I think we'll have to. After break, inshallah, brothers, so the break now. Okay, about 15, you said 20, but I said 15 minutes, please be back, inshallah, yeah? And remember, no Pakistani time. Time as time is, inshallah, yeah? 15 minutes, Jazakallah khair.
Was to approach you, if an atheist was to approach you, and like you mentioned in your lecture about how science, it can't prove, it has no basis to prove God. And Islam is there and it proves the existence of Allah. So if an atheist was to come and approach you and ask you, how can you prove from Islam to me as an atheist that Allah exists?
Okay. Good question, Jazakallah. I've gone through a whole journey with this here for the past 5-6 years, because initially when I got involved in the da'wah, it was based on very, very strong philosophical, logical arguments for God's existence. Now, yes, we have very strong logical, philosophical arguments for God's existence. Okay? There's no doubt about that. There's actually a book that's coming out, I believe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, written by Hamza Lutsis. It's called The Divine Reality, God, Islam, and the Mirage of Atheism. That book, I read the whole book, I've gone through it in review stage. That book covers every single argument you could think of for the existence of God, and it breaks down every single argument you could think of that atheists give against God. Okay? So make sure you read that book, bro. That'll give you all the logical arguments. But the way I see it now, and the correct way of understanding it is this, bro. The existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessary, is foundational. Okay? The best analogy I can think of is this, bro. Imagine someone walking out on a very sunny, bright day. Yeah, the sun's shining, there's no clouds. He walks out, he goes into a park or a patch of soil or sand, sticks his head in the ground, right into the ground, and then he says, prove to me the sun exists. Yeah? This is the situation of human beings. Right? When the sun is so evident that if he was to just put his head out in the sand, he will see. Right? Well, this is what they're doing. So this whole paradigm of prove to me God exists is a thing that we shouldn't be entertaining. Because the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is foundational. Okay? Now there's 2 ways you can look at this. We know from the Islamic tradition we're given the concept of the fitrah as well. Okay? The concept of the fitrah is this innate disposition, this internal knowing human beings have. right? So internally we know Allah exists, right? For example, many scholars have written on it, explaining what the fitrah is, this innate disposition, how much it can tell us, and so on. You can go and study that for yourself. But generally it's accepted and understood that this fitrah, it allows us to know internally, foundationally, that Allah exists and that we need to love Him. Yeah, we have this innate love for Him. And it's almost like the real world is real. Remember we talked about the basic belief of science, the foundational belief of science? Now here's a belief that it just is. For example, bro, if I asked you, prove to me that the real world exists right now. Yeah, the world around you exists right now. You would probably say, well, I can feel the chair I'm sitting on. You know, I could slap the brother next to me. I'm eating some rice. I can feel the rice I'm eating. Yeah, you can say these things. But I can just say to you, how do you know that the things you're feeling and experiencing right now are not just in your brain, and your brain's not on a planet, and some aliens are sticking probes into it, making you feel like you're here right now? You see, that's a possibility. You can't disprove that. But the point is, we don't believe this as human beings because we take the evidence. It's basic to believe that the world is real, and we live that way. Yeah? And that's a strong foundational belief. In the same way, as Muslims, the belief that existence of Allah is foundational, is necessary to our lives. Okay? So we begin with Allah. This is what Allah says in the verse. The people of understanding are who begin with Allah, already in the remembrance of Allah. So it's about this fitrah, everyone has it. The atheist has it as well. Allah's given everyone it. But what happens is it becomes clouded over time. Right? It becomes covered. For example, we know there was a narration of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, every child is born with a fitrah, but his parents, make him a Christian, Majin, or a Jew. Right? So your social upbringing, your environment, your society, it clouds your fitrah. This natural base belief. Yeah? So what do we do as if you're involved in dawah? What do? Your job is to trigger the fitrah. Allah is the one that guides. But your job is to try removing that cloud, that gunk, that dirt that surrounds the fitrah, that mess. How do you do it? It could be through the Quran, it could be through logical arguments. So you use these things to awaken the fitrah. It could be through life experiences, for example. Yeah? Because many people, for example, there's a famous saying that there's no atheist on a sinking ship. Yeah? So when the plane's experiencing turbulence, the atheist screams out, "Oh God, help me," as well. Yeah? Allah tells us an example of the ships when they sail at sea and these huge waves come over like clouds. And at that point, they turn to Allah in sincere faith. They make dua to Him, "Allah save me." And then when Allah saves them, only a few of them, remain on faith. Most of them will just turn away. They're ungrateful. Yeah? So this is the state of human beings. The fitrah is there. I mean, it's very interesting. Take an atheist, yeah? Put him on a sinking ship, and he will scream out to God. Right? At that time, the interesting thing to ask is, at that moment, when he's experiencing this life-threatening event, what logical argument or scientific proof is he basing his belief on? Nothing, yeah? It's the innate thing that comes out, yeah? So the point is, fitrah is there in everyone. It's about triggering it. How do you trigger it? It could be through Quran, it could be through logical arguments, it could be through experiences in many other ways, yeah? So this is the place we need to start with. So this is why we have to lead the discourse with atheists now. For many years, we followed this idea, which is, we have to prove logically and rationally God's existence. Right? If you look centuries back, we had some of the groups in early Islam that moved away from the straight path because they had pressure from the philosophers, Greek philosophers, which made them come up with these ideas that they had to justify God's existence rationally. Yeah? But as human beings, our rational faculties are limited. Yeah? This is why when you come to the Quran, we hear and we obey. We submit to what Allah is going to tell us because Allah is the creator, we are the creation, Allah knows best. We don't. So the most logical thing to do is suspend your rationality at that point and leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So it's very important we understand is that we lead the discourse now. For a long time we've been doing this. Speak to an atheist, here's a logical argument, here's a philosophical argument, here's a rational argument. But at the end of the day, we have something with the truth, it's innate. So we lead the discourse, tell them, look, the belief in God is innate. Just like a man going out on a bright sunny day, if he wants to bury his head in the sand and say, "Give me proof of the sun," that's his problem. You need to pull your head out of the sand. Yeah, Allah doesn't need you. This arrogant nature of atheists. They say, "Well, prove to me God exists, and then I'll think about if I want to worship Him." Yeah? No, Allah doesn't need you. If you want guidance, you're the one that's in need of Allah. If you want guidance, if you've seen that the life you've been living as an atheist is leading to depression and anxiety and sadness and all of these things, you need Allah. So you need to make that journey towards Allah. Right? And you need to realize these things. So lead the discourse. We have to speak with confidence, bro. Yeah? Because remember, it's sad, because even as Muslims, we're programmed in the society we live in. And the program is, Seeing is believing, seeing is believing, seeing is believing. Science, 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 yeah? If you can't observe it, you can't believe it. If you can't observe it, you can't believe it. Who said this paradigm was correct anyway? It's never been like this throughout history. Yeah? It's only a modern phenomenon, so correct that discourse. Allah is foundational, Allah is basic. Everything within the universe makes sense through it. Yeah? So hopefully that answers the question. Yes,
so one of the things that you pointed out in your lecture was that about the scientific method, and you showed that from a Muslim perspective it would need reform. So how is
sorry, what was that?
that the scientific method would need sort of a reform in terms of from a Muslim perspective? But how is that possible when this can only be done by Muslim academics, and Muslim academics can only go through the academia that's present today, which is even on both sides of the world, is based on scientific method. And everyone that goes into academics is basically, they're just engulfed by it and don't really challenge it.
Okay, so good question, bro, but let me just correct it. What I meant to say, I probably said it incorrectly, was that not the scientific method needs a reform. The method is fine, like it works, it's fantastic. Muslims developed this method anyway. Ibn Haytham, for example, was the first, in his book on optics, he wrote about this method. He was the first to bring it together. They've only developed it a little bit more since then. So the method is fine, but what needs to change is the underlying philosophy behind the method, the underlying thinking behind the method. You have naturalism or atheism, and you have Islam or theism. Yeah? So the atheist will say it's all skeptical, we're not sure of anything, it all came from nothing, it's all random. The Muslim will say, no, Allah created it, He controls it, but He's given us this method to use so we can see His science, and we can benefit humanity through it. That's what needs to change. And when we have this holistic understanding, bro, can we truly use the method and do justice to it as well? Now, the second part of your question about, like you said, most academics, when Muslims get to that level, they're normally secular anyway, they're not really interested in Islam or thinking in the correct way. You're right, that is a big problem. Yeah? But what does that require now? What's the solution? The solution isn't to worry about what they're doing. The solution is to have brothers and sisters who are well grounded in their foundations, their tradition, to then focus their lives on taking that endeavor to reach that level where they can then start becoming movers and shakers, basically, inshallah. So that's what we need to do. We need a new generation to come up with it, inshallah. Right? So it's about developing that within yourself, inshallah. If you answer the question. His hand has gone up slightly, 0.1 second before yours, bro. So that brother did a great jacket.
You briefly touched upon a holistic approach for dealing with atheist arguments and the like. Perhaps if there were any specific subjects, I don't know how to source as a book, and it's highly recommended, inshallah, for that. Firstly, if you could tell us the name of the book again, and secondly, a few brief areas we can look into which complements this holistic approach for dealing with everyday atheists that we meet, for example, in the workplace, for people working in the public sector. Is there anything we could ask?
Exactly right. So the book name is The Divine Reality, God, Islam, and the Mirage of Atheism. Okay, so that's the book. It's a very good book, mashallah. I recommend everyone to read it, inshallah, if you can, because it covers everything, inshallah. As far as points of reference and what to study so you can start engaging with atheists, we have a resource online on YouTube. It's called the GDM Show, or the LDM Show previously. So we have lots of content there. Okay, so it's all there that you can go to and learn and take these concepts and ideas. But for more of a deeper study, like a proper study, not just the superficial watching the video and using it, here's what I would recommend from my limited experience, or what I'm trying to do myself. Try to make the Quran an integral part of your life. Right? Study the Quran first and foremost, because it has everything there. Every argument is there. If you see Hamza's book, every single argument has a Quranic origin to it. Right? And the Quran puts it in a way which is far more powerful than any philosopher can put it. Okay? So study the Quran and make it, so say if you want to make the goal of your study to focus on atheism, study the Quran, you will see things there. You will see ideas and arguments. For example, I was recently reading, Allah says in Surah Baqarah, كَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ How can you deny Allah? How can you deny Allah when you were dead and He gave you life? Reflect over the Quran. It's something we don't do anymore. We read it, we may even read a translation, we just speak through it, right? Take a verse, study the verse, reflect over it. What does Allah mean? Because the ayat, we call them verses, but they're like four-dimensional, bro. It's almost like a space and time in itself, yeah? When you start pondering over a verse, you just start to see so many things, yeah? So many ideas and things come to your mind, subhanAllah, this makes sense, this makes sense. Remember, obviously we're not doing tafsir, this is tadabbur, yeah? So there's a difference. But these are reflections you have. You can also have a tafsir which if you don't know the Arabic language, generally is good anyway. You know, maybe even Kathir study. So just make the Quran an integral part of your study. Along with this, get a very strong grounding in your aqidah. Yeah? So an understanding of who Allah is, His worship, His oneness, His worship, and His lordship, His names and attributes. Very important, something that's been missing in the dawah in the past couple of years. Yeah? We all made this mistake. Yeah? We went straight to the philosophy books and it was a mess. Yeah? So the point is, have that grounding as well. Then, as long as you got this, read some philosophy books. Get a good understanding of what philosophy is, how it works. Get a good understanding of the philosophy of science, and study that. Also, maybe look at the way Christians have been using arguments, because they've been doing this for many years before us. Yeah? Now, one stream of Christian argumentation, which I've recently been looking at, is called presuppositionalism, foundational arguments. Yeah? Normally, Christians make arguments like, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe must have a cause, kalam, and all of these arguments. They're okay as well. But I'm of the opinion that the atheists, they don't even deserve they don't deserve for you to have a discussion with them. Because you are talking to someone, and when you give proof to someone for Allah's existence, what are you doing? You're in a court, He's the judge, and you're putting Allah on trial. Yeah? We don't want to do that. Yeah? The point is, you have to show Him that your very ability to question Allah's existence, your rational minds that you're using to question Allah's existence, these faculties, I'm sorry mate, they don't make sense on atheism, right? Or from these blind random physical processes. So for you to deny God, you need to believe in God to start with, because only God makes sense to your rational faculties, the use of logic and these things, right? So point out foundational problems in the world. Morality, what's morality? Where do you get morals from? What's right and wrong? You have an issue with Islamic morals. Yeah, you throw out loads of coal mine verses and throw them out there, but where do you get your morals from? According to you, everything's an accident. Everything's designed through the evolutionary process to survive and reproduce. If it's all about survival, we should be raping like nurse sharks rape. Yeah? This is the reality, but with the cushion and the covering, it's about exposing their foundations. So look at their foundations, study these foundations. And hopefully that will, inshallah, get us going for that.
My question is regarding the last decade or so, especially my generation, maybe before, a lot of Muslims became convinced or tried to become convinced of Islam, especially through the so-called scientific miracles in the Quran, so such as assuming there's some kind of verses talk about Big Bang theories or certain shape of the planet or so on. They're interpreting in that such manner, which led to loads of generation, huge amount of Muslims trying to get convinced to it. But you had a massive shattering effect when, for recently, many scholars, academics came out refuting Big Bang theory, saying there's a membrane theory and so on, which led a lot of Muslims to doubt the belief and many to apostatize as well. And now we have quite a lot of scholars coming forward from Al-Maghrib saying what we did in the last decade or so was totally incorrect method. So just want to get your thought on about these so-called reinterpreting verses about scientific miracle, how dangerous they are, and we shouldn't base our conviction in Islam with these interpretations.
That's a phenomenal question, but it's very relevant in these times. Interestingly, Hamza, I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe he was the first to publish a paper on this called Scientific Miracles in the Quran. More in modern time. Obviously, our scholars from the past have actually made points on this as well. The point, he said, he struggled really hard to convince some of the scholars that this is the correct approach, because what had happened was that this scientific miracles narrative, which was popularized in the 80s by Morris Bukai, his book, Quran, Science, and the Bible, in light of science, something like this, and obviously Dr. Zakir Naik, Sheikh, and many others, they popularized this narrative, which is the scientific miracles in the Quran. Now, like you said, many atheists, many academics came out and said, no, well, it doesn't match here, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, cause lots of doubt on Muslims, and so on and so forth. But the key point is this, bro. What Hamza basically said was, there's a whole article you can read, it's called Scientific Miracles in the Quran. What he said was simple. To try to justify the Quran or prove the Quran via science is injustice to the Quran. Okay, and the reason is this, because the Quran is wahi, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's his literal word. Science is a method that can't give you absolute truth. It's always changing, it's in flux. Right? So how can we take something that's absolute and try to prove it via something that's changing all the time, in flux? Straight away there's a problem there, right? There's something that doesn't add up. Also, we have to remember that the Quran is not a book of science, it's not a scientific textbook. It's there to lead us to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah may speak about natural phenomena in the Quran, such as the mountains, such as the skies, the heavens and the earth, which Allah does, the fetus, right? But why is Allah speaking about these things? He's not speaking about these things so we open up a scientific textbook and look at current modern day understanding of science, which is not absolute, by the way, and then compare it to the Quran and try to match it. That's not why. It's so it can lead us to His worship. Right? That's the key point. So this idea of scientific miracles is wrong. Right? It's absolutely wrong. And the sad thing is that we've taken on to hold into it so much, it's almost become an Aqidah issue for us, which is not. Yeah? It's not credo, it's just a matter of da'wah and tadabbur. Right? Yes, we've had it for a while, but it's, as a Muslim, it's a duty upon us. When we realize something's incorrect, to say it's incorrect. Right? Now, what we have to realize, yes, as Muslims, we can appreciate Allah speaks about nature and speak to non-Muslims in the da'wah about this. Allah speaks about the heavens and the earth. He speaks about the fetus. He speaks about these things. But make them realize why Allah speaks about these things. Right? Don't say that, look, here's a scientific miracle. Look, if you want to claim a miracle, two things have to happen. Number one, that the scientific theory that you're comparing the Quran to is absolute unchanging. Okay, number one. Number two is that the particular verse in the Quran that you're correlating the science with has only one meaning. And that's the absolute meaning. Now both of these things are not true. Because we know any given verse in the Quran has a scope of interpretation and meaning. Right? For example, according to the rules of exegesis, you can't say a particular verse X only means Y. You can't say that. You can say verse X may mean Y, but it may mean something else. Right? And it's not unlimited interpretation, there's a scope. But the point is, you can't say that a particular verse only means this, only intended this purpose. Right? Secondly, the scientific method we know is not absolute. So they may have a theory, a strong theory, but it's not 100% true. So seeing these two realities makes no sense claiming scientific miracles. It's a lie. Literally a lie. So what's the best way to approach it? Simple way to say it. Allah speaks about natural phenomena. Some of the natural phenomena may be in line with what modern science understands today. That's not important, that's a side point. But look at the reason God mentions these things, so you connect with it, you worship it, right? You turn back to it. That's the key point. So we need to start correcting that narrative, inshallah. Hope you answer the question. Or we take one more to answer the question.
Two kind of questions.
Okay.
My first question is of the Salam, the Pakistan physicist, he went to Muslim about science. And the Muslim impression he gave when he spoke was that the Muslims are scared of science. Why is that? That's the first question. Second question, kind of connected, is I've spoken to so many Muslims in my 16 years of South practicing, and the Muslim world generally, those I've spoken to, they're not academic. I'm seriously like sudden. I don't know what to do. Doing a constructed prism. Oh, I don't know if this is the easy. It's like, well, my comment.
Just speak, bro. Close the ear.
Sorry. The Muslim world is so backwards. They're scared of academic. They're scared of logic. They go against the Quran. It's like that kind of fear with science and logic.
Okay, so regarding the first point, could you just repeat that?
After Saddam, the Pakistan,
Yes.
he was trying to encourage the Muslims, God, he was trying to encourage the that do science, physics, and the Muslim world is scared. That's what he said. They're scared of science. As if people should have hearts in their hearts.
And I would agree. I think it's true. The problem is some of it's our fault, some of it's external, but start with ourselves, right? There is a fear because the reality is, well, what's instilled within us, this previous generation, is it's this, from a practicing perspective, we haven't understood that the Quran promotes the science, calls us to look at the universe and do these things, right? These are tools Allah has given us to do His worship. The reason is because we don't study the Quran, we've turned away from it. Yeah? Simple fact is this, because what we've done, especially in the Pakistani communities, we follow leaders within the communities, but we're lazy. Simple point is we're lazy. We don't go away and study these things ourselves. Yeah? I mean, wallahi, bro, you can, even with very superficial study, you will understand things which will change your life. Yeah? I have studied very superficial, being very honest with you. I haven't studied at any academic level. Yeah? But the point is, even a superficial study, there's so much barakah in this deen, bro, of Islam. Even someone who studies it superficially, with half a brain, like I have here, you will see things which you could, it's things fall into place, it makes sense. So things we turn away from the Quran, yeah, we need to turn towards it. And on top of it, obviously, there's this external influence, which is like this pressure. That look, atheism and science are together, they're one. Yeah, if you want to be a good scientist, you have to be an atheist. So these narratives as well. And so they're adding more faith, more pressure. But the way out of it is to just understand the reality of these things. Understand what science is, and understand what Islam is. And once you get a rough understanding of these two realities, bro, it's just all guns blazing, bro. You will want to go to the science and correct people, bro. You know, and there's people that are taking advantage of this stuff. So it's about people understanding this now and taking those steps to change and improve. Hopefully answers the question. Jazakallah khair, brothers. We're going to conclude now, inshallah. May Allah bless you for coming out tonight and inshallah staying through the whole event, inshallah. Okay, if you guys want to study this stuff more from a superficial perspective, like I said, the GDM show, the LDM show, or on the LDM channel, there's a lot of content. London Dawah Movement channel on YouTube, which will get you started, inshallah, and then you guys can go and study further as well. So we've got cheap and we'll have to cheap also in the employees as well. So we're going to books.
إن المصدقين والمصدقات وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا يضاعف لهم ولهم أجر كريم.